The cafeteria on Station 7 was always loud during meal hours. Hundreds of students from dozens of different species filled the massive hall with voices, clicks, hums, and sounds that human ears could not even hear. The ceiling stretched high above, dotted with floating lights that changed color based on the time of day. Right now they glowed a soft orange, marking the evening meal. Sat alone at a small table near the wall. Her tray held a bowl of rice, some vegetables, and a protein cube that the station's food systems had tried to make taste like chicken. It did not taste like chicken, but ate it anyway, her eyes fixed on the in front of her. Around her, life continued as if she did not exist. A group of students walked past her table, their massive bodies blocking the light for a moment. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that shifted between blue and purple depending on their mood. Bioluminescent crests rose from their heads like crowns, glowing softly as they laughed at some joke. None of them looked at. None of them even slowed down. This was normal. This had been normal for 3 years now. Had arrived at the Galactic Integration Academy as part of humanity's first wave of exchange students. Earth had only made contact with the wider galaxy 15 years ago, and humans were still considered the new species on the block. Young, inexperienced, fragile. The Academy accepted students from over 40 different species. It trained them for careers in diplomacy, science, trade, and military service. It was supposed to build bridges between worlds, to create a new generation of leaders who understood each other. Had applied to study xenobiology. Her application essay talked about her love of ocean life on Earth, her dream of studying alien ecosystems, her hope of contributing to galactic knowledge. The essay was well written and sincere. It was also a complete lie. She finished her protein cube and pushed the tray aside. Across the cafeteria, she watched a student accidentally knock over a drink with one of its 4 legs. The species was not built for the furniture here. Their bodies were long and segmented, covered in hard shells that clicked when they moved. The student made a sound of embarrassment, its antennae flattening against its head as it tried to clean up the mess. Noted this name. Third-year student, specializing in communications technology, she had files on everyone. Mind if I sit? Looked up. Her roommate Tally stood beside the table with her own tray. Tally was a species that looked somewhat like humans if humans were taller, thinner, and had skin the color of pale silver. Her eyes were large and dark, and her voice was soft and musical. Of course, said, gesturing to the empty chair. Tally sat down with a grateful sigh. Long day. Professor kept us an extra hour for the simulation. I think my brain is melting. That sounds difficult, said. It was terrible. We had to negotiate a trade agreement with a simulated delegation, and you know how they get about mineral rights. Tally stabbed at her food with something like frustration. What about you? How was xenobiology? Fine. We studied the mating patterns of hive structures. Sounds fascinating. It was educational. Tally looked at her for a moment and recognized the expression. It was the same expression everyone gave her eventually. Polite confusion. A sense that something was missing from the conversation, but an inability to identify what. You know, Tally said slowly, we've been roommates for 3 years now, and I feel like I barely know you. Smiled. It was a practiced smile, warm and slightly shy. I'm not very interesting. I grew up in a small town by the ocean. I like reading. I study hard, she shrugged. That's really all there is. But you never talk about home. You never call anyone. You don't have any friends here besides me, and honestly, I'm not even sure we count as friends. Tally paused, looking embarrassed. I'm sorry that came out wrong. It's okay. I understand what you mean. Picked up her and pretended to check something. I'm just a quiet person. Some people are loud and social. I'm not. There's nothing wrong with that. Tally nodded, but her large eyes still held that same confused look. I suppose not. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Around them, the cafeteria buzzed with activity. A group of human students sat together at a far table, laughing loudly about something. Knew their names too. All second-year students. All exactly what they appeared to be, bright young people excited about their future in the stars. Was not like them. She had never been like them. "I'm going to head back to the room," she said, standing up with her tray. "I want to review my notes before tomorrow's exam." "Always studying," Tally said with a small smile. "Don't work too hard." "I won't," disposed of her tray and walked out of the cafeteria. The corridors of Station 7 were wide and clean, designed to accommodate species of all sizes. She walked close to the wall, her footsteps quiet, her presence small. A group of cadets passed her, their deep voices echoing off the metal walls. They were talking about combat training, about the upcoming field exercise at some abandoned station. Listened without appearing to listen. She remembered without appearing to remember. And she kept walking, small and quiet and utterly forgettable, exactly as she had trained herself to be. The transport ship hummed softly as it carried 32 students through the darkness of space. Sat near the back, her eyes closed, her breathing slow and steady. To anyone watching, she appeared to be sleeping. She was not sleeping, she was listening. The other students talked excitedly about the mission ahead. Waypoint was an abandoned mining station on the edge of civilized space. Pirates had used it as a base years ago, but they were long gone now. The academy had cleaned it up and turned it into a training ground for field exercises. Today's exercise was simple, a simulated rescue mission. Teams would move through the station, locate dummy targets, and extract them safely. Points would be given for speed, coordination, and minimal casualties. A young with bright blue skin had been appointed team leader. He stood at the front of the transport, his 4 arms gesturing as he explained the plan. His bioluminescent crest glowed with confidence. "We split into 4 groups," he said, his translator turning his deep rumbles into words everyone could understand. "Alpha team takes the main corridor. Beta team goes through engineering. Gamma team handles the cargo bay. Delta team stays in reserve." Had been assigned to Delta team, the reserve group, the ones who would wait and watch unless something went wrong. She found that fitting. One of the other human students sat a few seats away. He was tall for a Korean man, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He had tried to talk to several times over the years. She had always been polite but distant. Now he caught her eye and gave her a small wave. She nodded back and closed her eyes again. The transport docked with Waypoint 30 minutes later. The students filed out into the station's main airlock, their excitement filling the cold metal space with noise. Was the last one out. She moved slowly, carefully, her eyes taking in every detail of her surroundings. The walls were old and stained. The lights flickered in places. The air smelled like rust and recycled oxygen. Something felt wrong. She could not explain it. There was no obvious sign of danger. The station looked exactly like the briefing materials had shown. But her instincts, trained over years of brutal education, were screaming at her. She said nothing, she simply watched. The team spread out according to plan. Alpha team moved down the main corridor, their weapons raised, their movements professional. Beta team disappeared into the engineering section. Gamma team headed for the cargo bay. Delta team waited near the airlock with and 3 other students, 2 and 1. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Reports came in over the communication system. Alpha team had reached their first checkpoint. Beta team was making good progress. Gamma team had found the first dummy target. Then the lights went out. Not just dimmed, not just flickered. Complete darkness, sudden and absolute, swallowed the entire station. Did not move, she did not panic, she simply stood very still and listened. Screams came from somewhere deeper in the station. Weapon fire, bright flashes in the darkness, followed by silence. The communication system crackled with confused voices, then went dead. "What's happening?" one of the students whispered, his voice high with fear. "I don't know," the other one said. "No." Emergency lights kicked on a moment later, casting everything in a dim red glow. Through the shadows, saw figures moving toward them. Not students. These were adults, heavily armed, wearing mismatched armor and cruel expressions. Pirates, the syndicate, if she recognized the markings correctly. They were supposed to be gone. They were supposed to be dead or imprisoned. They were neither. "Don't move," one of them shouted, his weapon aimed at the Delta team. "Hands up now." The students raised their hands immediately, trembling. They made a clicking sound of distress. Raised her hands slowly, her face blank, her body language showing nothing but fear. Inside she was counting enemies, counting weapons, counting exits. The pirates herded them through the station at gunpoint. They passed Alpha Team, already bound and gagged on the floor. They passed Beta Team, being dragged out of engineering. They passed Gamma Team, several of them bleeding from wounds. Everyone ended up in the cargo bay. 32 students, sitting on the cold metal floor, surrounded by armed criminals who should not have been there. "Try to stand up." "This is a mistake," he said, his voice steady despite the situation. "We're students. We have no value as hostages. The Academy won't negotiate for us." One of the pirates, a man with cybernetic eyes, walked over to him. He said nothing. He simply raised his weapon and shot in the shoulder. The young collapsed with a scream, his blue blood spreading across the floor. "Anyone else want to negotiate?" the man asked. "Silence." The pirate smiled. He scanned the crowd of terrified students and his cybernetic eyes stopped on the humans. "You," he said, pointing at, "come here." His face went pale, but he stood up slowly. 2 pirates grabbed him and dragged him to the center of the room. "Humans," the man said loudly, addressing everyone. "The species in the galaxy, weak, soft, useless." He grabbed by the hair. "Perfect for making examples." Sat in the corner, her hands in her lap, her head down. She was still counting, still waiting. The moment would come. It always did. She just had to be patient. The pirate hit across the face. The sound echoed through the cargo bay like a gunshot. Fell to his knees, blood dripping from his split lip, but he did not cry out. He simply looked up at his attacker with defiant eyes. "Brave," the pirate said with a mocking smile. "Stupid but brave." Watched from her corner. She had been watching for 3 hours now, sitting perfectly still, her breathing slow, her body relaxed. The pirates had stopped paying attention to her after the first hour. She was small. She was quiet. She was nobody. That was the point. In those 3 hours she had learned everything she needed to know. 7 pirates total. 4 in the cargo bay, 2 patrolling the corridors, 1 in the control room trying to disable the station's emergency beacon. They had 6 pulse rifles, 3 pistols, and various knives. The leader, the one with cybernetic eyes, was the most dangerous. He moved like someone who had been in many fights and won all of them. The station's layout was now clear in her mind. 3 exits from the cargo bay. Maintenance corridors running through the walls. Ventilation shafts large enough for someone small to crawl through. She had also identified the station's power distribution node. It was old, poorly maintained, and connected to a junction box just outside the cargo bay. One sharp impact in the right place would kill all power for approximately 15 minutes while the backup systems reset. Had been trained for situations like this since she was 14 years old. Her teachers had been hard and patient. They had taught her how to wait, how to watch, how to become invisible. They had taught her that the most dangerous weapon was not a gun or a knife, but the ability to be underestimated. She was very good at being underestimated. At 3:45 station time, she began to move. Not obviously, not quickly. She simply shifted her position slightly, moving closer to the wall. One of the pirates glanced at her, saw nothing threatening, and looked away. At 3:46, she reached the ventilation grate behind her. Her fingers found the screws. They were loose, probably from age. She removed them silently, one by one, hiding the motion with her body. At 3:47, she slipped into the ventilation shaft and disappeared. 30 seconds later, the lights went out. The cargo bay erupted in chaos. Students screamed. Pirates shouted. Weapon lights clicked on, cutting through the darkness like angry stars. "What happened?" the leader yelled. "Get the power back." "I'm trying," someone answered from the darkness. "The system's not responding." In the ventilation shaft, moved like water through a pipe. She made no sound. Her hands and feet found holds with practiced ease. She had crawled through spaces like this hundreds of times in training. Darkness was not her enemy. Darkness was her friend. She dropped out of a shaft behind the first patrolling pirate. He never saw her coming. Her arm wrapped around his throat, cutting off blood to his brain. 3 seconds of pressure, and he went limp. She lowered him to the ground silently and took his weapon. She did not need it, but it was better that he did not have it. The second patrolling pirate was in the next corridor. He was shining his light everywhere, his weapon raised, his breathing fast and scared. Came from above, dropping from a ceiling panel. Her knee hit the back of his neck. He collapsed without a sound. 2 down, 5 to go. She moved toward the control room. The pirate there was frantically pressing buttons, trying to restore power. He did not hear her enter. He did not see the shadow moving behind him. He only felt a sudden pressure on the sides of his neck, and then nothing. 3 down. Back to the cargo bay. The 4 remaining pirates had formed a circle, their backs to each other, their lights pointing outward. Smart. They had clearly been in dangerous situations before. But they were looking for an enemy at their level, someone with a gun, someone who would attack from a distance. Was not that kind of enemy. She studied the ceiling. Old stations like this always had weak points, places where panels could be removed, places where someone small and light could hide. She climbed. The first cargo bay pirate died standing up. Not died exactly. He simply stopped breathing for a moment as hands found the exact points on his body that controlled consciousness. He dropped his weapon and fell. The others spun toward the sound, their lights finding nothing but their fallen companion. "Where is she?" someone screamed. "Where is?" The second one went down mid-sentence. A shape dropped from the ceiling, struck twice, and vanished back into the shadows before anyone could aim. The leader fired his weapon wildly. Energy bolts lit up the cargo bay in strobing flashes. Students screamed and covered their heads, but there was nothing to hit, nothing to shoot at. "Show yourself," the leader roared into the darkness. Did not show herself. She simply waited until he turned his back for 1 second, then appeared behind him like a ghost. Her elbow struck the base of his skull. Her foot swept his legs. Her hands found his throat before he hit the ground. He was strong. He fought back. But strength meant nothing when your opponent knew exactly where every nerve and blood vessel in your body was located. 3 seconds later, he was unconscious. The last pirate threw down his weapon and raised his hands. "I surrender," he screamed. "I surrender, please don't." Stepped out of the shadows. She was barely breathing hard. Her hands were steady. Her face showed nothing at all. She looked at the last pirate for a long moment. Then she hit him once precisely, and he joined his companions on the floor. The lights came back on at 3:59, 12 minutes and 14 seconds after they had gone out. Was sitting in her corner again, exactly where she had been before. Her hands were in her lap. Her head was down. Her breathing was slow and steady. Across the cargo bay, stared at her with wide eyes. He had seen something in those 12 minutes of darkness. A shadow that moved like nothing human should move. A small woman who had dismantled 7 armed criminals like they were children. Met his gaze for just a moment. Then she looked away, and became invisible again. The Academy sent rescue ships within hours of receiving the distress signal. They found 32 students alive, 7 pirates unconscious and bound, and a mystery that would take days to solve. Commander led the investigation personally. He was old his crest faded to a dull gray, his 4 arms from decades of military service. He had seen many strange things in his long career, but nothing had prepared him for what he found on Waypoint. The students told confused stories. The lights had gone out. There had been sounds of fighting. When the lights came back, all the pirates were down. Nobody knew what had happened. Nobody had seen anything clearly. Except the young human sat in the medical bay, a bandage on his face, his eyes staring at nothing. When came to interview him, he spoke in a voice that trembled slightly. "It was," he said, "the quiet girl, the one nobody notices." Checked his human female, third-year xenobiology student. Combat assessment scores average. No flags, no concerns, no special notations of any kind. "Are you certain?" he asked. "I saw her," said. "Not clearly, but I saw. She moved like, I don't know how to describe it, like she wasn't human, like she was something else wearing human skin." Made a note and continued his investigation. The station's main security system had been destroyed during the pirate occupation, but its technical team found something interesting. A backup server, hidden in a maintenance closet, had been recording the whole time. The pirates had not known about it. Neither had anyone else, apparently. The footage was grainy and dark. The infrared sensors had trouble with the power fluctuations, but it was enough. Watched the recording in his office alone with the door locked. He watched it once, then twice, then 7 times, slowing down certain sections, zooming in on certain moments. When he finished, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he called a meeting of the Academy's senior staff. 12 instructors gathered in the secure conference room, and others, the heads of every major department. They sat around the curved table and watched as played the footage on the main screen. Nobody spoke during the 12 minutes and 14 seconds of recording. They watched the small human woman slip through the ventilation shaft. They watched her disable the power grid with a single precise strike. They watched her move through the darkness like a predator, taking down armed pirates without weapons, without sound, without mercy. When the footage ended, the room remained silent. "This is impossible," said Professor, an instructor whose antennae were pressed flat against her head in what recognized as extreme distress. Her assessment scores showed nothing. She tested as completely average. "She didn't test as average," said quietly. "She made herself test as average. Look at this." He pulled up another file. "I reviewed her physical assessments from all 3 years. Her scores are almost identical. Same times, same accuracy, same strength measurements. The odds of that happening naturally are approximately 1 in 50 million. "She was hiding," someone said. "She was performing," corrected. "Every test, every assessment, every interaction. She calculated exactly what an unremarkable human student would do, and she did exactly that. Nothing more, nothing less." Another instructor, a young named, leaned forward. "But why? Why would she hide such abilities?" "That is what we need to find out." Pressed a button on the table. "Bring her in." The door opened a few minutes later. Walked into the conference room with her usual quiet manner. She was small compared to the aliens around her, barely reaching the chest of the shortest. Her face showed polite confusion, as if she could not imagine why she had been summoned. She sat in the chair indicated and folded her hands on the table. "Miss," began, "we have recovered security footage from Waypoint." Something flickered in his eyes, just for a moment, then it was gone. "I see," she said calmly. "Would you like to explain what we saw?" Was silent for a long moment. She looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. The instructors shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. There was something different about her now. something they had never noticed before. "My file says I grew up in a coastal city," she said finally, "that I studied marine biology, that I applied to the academy because I wanted to learn about alien ecosystems." "Is that not true?" asked. "Parts of it are true. I did grow up near the ocean. I did study biology," paused, "but that was before I was recruited." "Recruited by whom?" Another long pause, seemed to be making a decision. Finally she spoke again and her voice had changed. It was still soft, still quiet, but there was weight behind it now. Authority. "Humanity has been watching the galaxy for 15 years, she said. "We have learned many things in that time. We learned that we are small, weak, and young compared to most species. We learned that the galaxy can be dangerous. And we learned that sometimes the best defense is not to appear threatening at all." Professor made a clicking sound. "You were planted here as a spy." "Not a spy," said. "A safeguard. Someone who could watch, listen, and act if necessary. Someone who could protect human interests without anyone knowing humans had interests to protect." The room erupted in whispered conversations. Raised a hand for silence. "How many others are there?" he asked. "How many humans like you?" Smiled. It was not the shy, polite smile the instructors had seen for 3 years. It was something else entirely. "Commander," she said softly, "do you really expect me to answer that?" Stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "No," he said, "I suppose I don't." The conference room had grown very quiet. 12 of the most powerful instructors in the Galactic Integration Academy sat frozen in their seats, staring at the small human woman who had just revealed herself to be something far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. Remained calm. Her hands stayed folded on the table. Her breathing stayed even. But there was no more pretending now. The mask she had worn for 3 years was gone, and what lay beneath was cold and patient and utterly controlled. "I want to be clear about something," she said, her voice still soft but carrying easily through the silent room. "I am not your enemy. I never was. The students on Waypoint were in danger. I removed that danger. That is all." Commander leaned forward. His crest had dimmed to nearly black, a sign of deep concern among his species. "You removed 7 armed criminals in 12 minutes, without weapons, without making a sound, and you expect us to simply accept that you are not a threat." "I expect nothing," replied. "I am simply telling you the truth. You can believe it or not." "Then tell us more truth." His voice hardened. "You said you were recruited. Recruited by whom? What organization trains humans to do what you did?" Was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. It was no longer the voice of a student addressing her teachers. It was the voice of someone explaining something to children. "Earth's history is different from most species in this room," she began. "They united their world through philosophy and shared purpose. They achieved peace through cultural harmony. They formed their hive structures and simply stopped fighting each other." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Humans did none of those things. Our planet has known war for as long as we have kept records. We have killed each other over land, over resources, over ideas, over gods. We have built weapons capable of destroying our entire world. We have used some of them." The instructor, a thin female named Sura, made a sound of distress. "We knew humans had a violent history, but—" "You knew what we wanted you to know," interrupted gently. "When humanity made first contact, we understood immediately that we were entering a galaxy full of species older and more powerful than us. We were weak. We were vulnerable. And we knew that if we showed our true nature, the galaxy would see us as dangerous." "So you lied," said flatly. "We showed you only part of the truth. We showed you our scientists, our artists, our diplomats. We showed you humans who were curious and friendly and eager to learn. All of that is real. Those people exist." Stood up slowly. Despite her small size, something in her presence made the room feel smaller, made the instructors lean back in their chairs. But there are other kinds of humans too. There are those of us who inherited different skills, different instincts. On Earth, we call ourselves many things: soldiers, agents, shadows. She walked toward the window that looked out at the stars. We are the descendants of hunters, warriors, survivors. For thousands of years, our ancestors killed to stay alive. That training is written into our bodies, our minds, our very blood. She turned back to face the room. The organization that recruited me has no official name. It doesn't exist in any government record. It finds children like me, children who show certain abilities, and it trains them. It teaches them to hide, to watch, to wait. It teaches them to become invisible. Professor Santini rose slightly, and then it places them in positions throughout the galaxy. Nodded, every major station, every embassy, every trade delegation. There are humans like me everywhere, watching, listening, protecting. Protecting what? Demanded. Humanity's interests, our survival, our future. Eyes swept across the room, meeting each gaze without flinching. We do not start conflicts. We do not assassinate political leaders or steal military secrets. We simply exist, hidden in plain sight, ready to act if our people are threatened. The room fell silent again. His mind was racing, calculating, reassessing everything he thought he knew about humans. He remembered every human he had ever met, every diplomatic mission, every peaceful exchange. How many of them had been like? How many shadows had he walked past without ever knowing? "Why tell us this now?" he asked finally. "Your cover is broken. You could have everything, maintained your story." Smiled slightly. It was the first genuine expression any of them had seen from her. "Because the footage exists, because saw me, because the truth would come out eventually." She walked back toward the table. "And because I want you to understand something important." She placed her hands flat on the table and leaned forward, and for a moment the instructors saw what the pirates on Waypoint must have seen in those 12 minutes of darkness. Something ancient, something predatory, something that had been hidden behind a mask of innocence and fragility. "Humanity is your ally," she said softly. "We believe in the same things you believe in: peace, cooperation, the future of all species. But we are not naive. We are not weak, and we are never, ever unprotected." She straightened up and walked toward the door. "What happens now?" asked. Paused at the threshold. She turned back, and for just a moment her mask slipped back into place. She was once again the quiet, forgettable student nobody had noticed for 3 years. "Now, nothing changes. The footage will be classified. My identity will be protected. I will continue my studies, graduate with average marks, and take a quiet job somewhere nobody will notice me." She smiled that shy, practiced smile. "Unless something threatens the people I am sworn to protect." And then she let the sentence hang in the air. "Be grateful we are on your side, Commander. Be grateful that the wolves among humanity chose to guard the flock rather than hunt it." The door closed behind her. Commander sat in the empty conference room for a long time after she left. He thought about the humans he knew, the ones who worked quietly in support roles throughout the academy, the ones who smiled politely and never caused trouble. He thought about all the places in the galaxy where humans had spread in the last 15 years, all those embassies, all those stations, all those ships. And he wondered, for the first time in his long career, if the galaxy had fundamentally misunderstood what humanity really was. Somewhere on Station 7, a small, quiet woman returned to her room and continued studying xenobiology. Her roommate asked how her day had been. "Fine," said with a small smile. "Nothing special happened." And she meant it. For her, this had simply been another day of doing what she was trained to do. Watching, waiting, protecting. Invisible.